two people who fell in love in their youth, but were separated by life circumstances meet again by chance. Together, they rediscover love but must confront the scars of the past to build a future they never thought possible. The sound of the kettle filled Alice's small apartment as she wandered around the kitchen, distractedly arranging cups on the counter. Her routine had become a sort of refuge, a predictable comfort amidst the chaos of her divorce. Her lawyer had said the process was almost over, but Alice knew that was just a formality. The real battle was emotional, accepting that the years invested in a crumbling marriage could not be reclaimed. Her gaze rested on a photograph pinned to the fridge. It was old, taken during a picnic at the local park, long before her husband's betrayals came to light. In the photo, Alice smiled carefree, almost youthful, holding a slice of cake while laughing at something now lost in time. Outside, the late autumn sky was turning gray. Alice had always loved autumn, but this year, the falling leaves seemed as heavy as the memories she was trying to leave behind. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. It was a message from her sister, asking if she would attend the family dinner next weekend. Alice typed a quick reply, assuring she would be there, though she wasn't sure she wanted to face more questions about the divorce. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Gabriel was descending the stairs of a worn-out townhouse, holding a grocery bag. The house belonged to his mother, whom he had decided to visit temporarily after losing his job. He told himself he was there to help with medical appointments and small home repairs, but deep down, he knew he was running from his own life. Gabriel had spent more than a decade building a solid career at an engineering firm. He always considered himself lucky to have achieved it on his own, without favors or privileges. But losing his job in a corporate restructuring made him realize how much his identity was tied to his work. Now, with each passing day, the uncertainty about the future felt heavier. His mother greeted him with a warm smile as he entered the door. "I brought everything you asked for," he said, placing the bag on the table. She gave a slight nod, watching him with concern. "You've been going out so little, son. Maybe you should take the chance to visit some of your old friends while you're here." Gabriel responded with a forced smile, trying to avoid the conversation. The truth was, the idea of reconnecting with old acquaintances made him uncomfortable. He dreaded questions about his life, why he was back in town, and what had happened to the ambitious young man everyone once knew. Later that same day, Gabriel decided to take a break from his introspection. He grabbed his wallet and went out to buy a few missing items for the house. He couldn't have imagined that this brief outing would change the course of his life. At the supermarket, Alice walked through the aisles with a shopping list in hand. With each step, her mind wandered, jumping between memories of the past and worries about the future. Her eyes were fixed on the shelves when she felt a slight bump and looked up. Gabriel, pushing a shopping cart, stopped abruptly when he saw Alice. He stood still for a moment, recognizing the face from years ago, before hesitantly smiling. "Alice?" She looked up surprised. His voice seemed to carry the weight of time, but also the familiarity of something precious. "Gabriel," she replied, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The two stood there, frozen in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by products and carts, but it felt as though the world around them had disappeared. Despite the shock of the encounter, neither of them mustered the courage to say much beyond polite phrases. Alice, unsure of how to continue, thanked Gabriel for remembering her and tried to keep the tone casual. The moment, however, was interrupted by a store employee needing to pass through the narrow aisle. They parted ways hastily, exchanging vague promises of talking later. Both left the supermarket with restless minds, feeling that something profound had been awakened, a forgotten piece of the past emerging in the present and bringing possibilities that could not be ignored. The day after the supermarket encounter, Alice couldn't get Gabriel out of her head. His image, his smile, seemed to insist on infiltrating her thoughts. She was washing the dishes when her sister called again, insisting she come to the family dinner. Alice agreed, more to escape her own thoughts than out of any genuine desire to face the family's questions. On the other side of town, Gabriel was dealing with a similar restlessness. Meeting Alice had reignited something he couldn't name: nostalgia, curiosity, or perhaps regret. He thought about how little time seemed to have changed her, even though the marks of maturity were evident. He decided he needed to do something, but he wasn't sure what. A few days later, as if moved by destiny, Gabriel found Alice's number on an old phone he still kept. He hesitated before sending the message, his fingers hovering over the keys. After all, what would he say? Finally, he opted for something simple. "It was great seeing you the other day. How about coffee to catch up?" Sending the message made him nervous, but the reply came quickly. "I'd love to. When are you free?" The meeting was set for Saturday, at a coffee shop downtown. Alice arrived a few minutes early and chose a table in the corner where she could watch the door. When Gabriel walked in, she felt a tightness in her chest, a mixture of anxiety and excitement. He looked the same, but the confidence he exuded in his youth was now replaced by a more reserved demeanor. "Alice," he said, smiling as he sat down, "it seems like time hasn't touched you." She laughed awkwardly. "I think time has been a bit kinder to me than life." "And you? Still chasing big projects?" Gabriel looked away for a moment. "Not so big anymore. I lost my job a few months ago, and I'm reorganizing things." There was a short, but comfortable silence. They began talking about the years they had lost, the paths they had taken, and slowly, the emotional barriers began to crumble. Gabriel spoke about his career, his dedication to work, and how he felt he had lost a part of himself in the process. Alice shared her struggle with a failed marriage, the sacrifices she had made, and how she was rediscovering who she was. In the middle of their conversation, Alice brought up a memory that made them both laugh. The day Gabriel fell off a bike trying to impress her in high school. "I wasn't even trying to impress you," he joked, laughing. "I just thought it would be a great way to show off my skills." "Well, you succeeded. You showed you know how to fall with style," Alice replied, with a smile that lit up the room. As the coffee cups emptied and time passed, they began to feel like they were picking up something that had been left unfinished. Yet there was a cautious air, as if both were afraid to step into unknown territory. Before saying goodbye, Gabriel decided to ask a question that had been on his mind since the supermarket. "Have you ever thought about what our lives would be like if we had stayed together?" Alice was silent for a moment, staring at the bottom of her coffee cup. "I have. I admit I've imagined it a few times, but maybe it wasn't meant to be, or at least I tried to convince myself of that." Gabriel nodded, but there was something in his eyes that showed he wasn't entirely convinced. With a timid smile, he stood up, promising to invite her for another coffee soon. As Alice watched Gabriel walk out the door, she felt something inside her begin to shift. The encounter wasn't just a coincidence. It was the beginning of something she didn't yet know how to define. The days following the coffee meeting were marked by a subtle restlessness for both Alice and Gabriel. They tried to return to their routines, but there was a quiet and constant presence in their thoughts, the conversations, the smiles, and the unspoken questions that still lingered in the air. It was as if the reunion had opened a door neither of them was ready to close. It didn't take long for Alice to receive another message from Gabriel. This time, he suggested a walk in the park where they used to go in their youth. She hesitated for a few moments before replying, but deep down, she knew she wanted to go. Gabriel arranged the meeting for late afternoon, and the sun set in orange hues as she arrived at the park. Gabriel was already there, sitting on a bench, gazing at the lake. When he saw her, he stood and waved, a sincere smile lighting up his face. "You came," he said, his voice a mix of relief and contentment. Alice smiled, adjusting the scarf around her neck. "I couldn't turn down such a nostalgic invitation." The two began walking through the park, flanked by trees swaying gently in the wind. Gabriel pointed to an old oak tree, where their initials were still carved. "Do you remember this?" Alice laughed as she saw the faded marks on the trunk. How could I forget? You spent weeks trying to convince me this wasn't vandalism. They laughed together, the sound light and genuine, as if for a moment the years that had separated them had disappeared. Gabriel seemed more at ease than he had been at the coffee shop, and Alice couldn't help but notice the sparkle in his eyes as he talked about their teenage years. After a while, they sat on a wooden bench near the lake. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the soft movement of the water and the distant laughter of children playing. Gabriel was the first to break the silence. Alice, I never stopped thinking about you. Even as life moved on, there were moments when I wondered what might have happened if things had been different. She looked at him, surprised by his candor. I thought about you too, Gabriel. But I think I was afraid to admit it. I always thought you were living a life so far removed from mine. Gabriel's eyes locked onto hers, as if searching for something in the words left unsaid. Maybe destiny was waiting for the right moment. Or maybe we both needed to go through everything we did before finding each other again. Alice sighed, feeling the weight of conflicting emotions. She wanted to believe his words, but the fear of being hurt again held her back. Gabriel noticed her hesitation and changed the course of the conversation. Did you know I wrote to you? After I moved, I sent a few letters. Alice frowned, surprised. Letters? I never received anything. Gabriel nodded, looking out at the lake. I thought you didn't reply because you wanted to move on, and I didn't want to push. It was hard, but I eventually accepted it. Alice blinked a few times trying to process this. Gabriel, if I had received them, I would have replied. I don't know what happened to those letters, but I never knew you tried to reach out. There was a heavy silence, full of unrealized possibilities. Gabriel seemed to reflect on her words, while Alice tried to imagine what might have been different. Before they said goodbye, Gabriel pulled something from his pocket. It was a small photograph of the two of them, taken at the park years ago. I found this a few days ago. I thought I'd lost it, but maybe I was holding on to it for this moment. Alice took the photo carefully, a nostalgic smile curving her lips. I can't believe you still have this. Gabriel smiled. Some things are hard to let go of. They parted with a promise to meet again, but both knew something had changed. The connection between them, once a dim ember, now burned brighter, illuminating possibilities they could barely comprehend. Alice paced around her apartment, holding the photograph Gabriel had given her. The image brought back a flood of memories, but also raised questions she couldn't ignore. The letters he mentioned, where were they? Who could have intercepted them? The idea that something or someone had prevented their communication in the past wouldn't leave her mind. Determined to investigate, Alice searched for answers deep in her memories. She remembered how strongly her mother had felt about Gabriel at the time and decided to confront her. She called her late in the afternoon, trying to sound as neutral as possible. Mom, do you remember if I received any letters back when Gabriel moved away? He said he wrote to me, but I never got anything. On the other end of the line, there was an uncomfortable silence before her mother responded. Letters? I don't know, Alice. Why are you asking about this now? Alice noticed the hesitation in her mother's tone and pressed further. He mentioned those letters when we reconnected. He said he wrote several times. If you know something, please tell me. There was another silence before her mother let out a deep sigh. Alice, maybe it's time you knew. I kept the letters. Alice felt her heart tighten. What? You kept them? Why? Her mother responded defensively. I thought I was protecting you. You were both so young, and I didn't think you had a future. I thought you deserved better. Alice closed her eyes, trying to process what she had just heard. She felt a mixture of anger and sadness. Finally, with a trembling voice, she replied, You had no right to decide that for me. You took away something that could have changed my life. Her mother tried to justify herself, but Alice ended the conversation. She needed time to process everything. Later that night, Alice couldn't bear the weight of the revelation and decided to tell Gabriel. She called him, her voice still heavy with emotion. Gabriel, I found out what happened to your letters.
My mom.
She kept them. She never told me. On the other end of the line, Gabriel was silent for a few seconds before responding, his tone calm but tinged with sadness. Your mom never liked me much, did she? I had my suspicions, but hearing this now… Alice sighed. I'm so sorry, Gabriel. I had no idea. If I had known… It wasn't your fault, Alice. But it explains a lot. The next day, the two met at the same coffee shop where they'd first reunited. Alice brought the letters, yellowed with time, but still legible. Gabriel read them in silence, his eyes reflecting the emotions he felt. When he finished, he looked at Alice. I wrote each one thinking that maybe you still felt something. I planned to stay in town if you replied. When I never got a response, I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. Alice's eyes filled with tears as she held one of the letters. Gabriel, I never knew. I would have responded. I would have done everything differently if I had received them. Gabriel smiled, a sad smile with a hint of hope. Maybe this is the moment that was meant to happen. The past, finally revealed, brought pain but also a sense of clarity. The path forward was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, both felt they could start anew. The days following the revelation of the letters were intense for Alice. Discovering her mother's secret still deeply troubled her, but now another weight seemed to take over her life. Her ex-husband, Robert, had found out about her recent meetings with Gabriel. Robert, who had always been controlling, didn't take well to the idea of Alice starting over. One day, while Alice was organizing her divorce papers, Robert unexpectedly appeared at her apartment. He knocked on the door insistently, and when Alice opened it, she found his gaze filled with displeasure. So, that's it? You've barely left the marriage and you already have someone new? Robert fired, crossing his arms. Alice took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. My life is none of your business, Robert. We're not together anymore. And just to be clear, Gabriel is nothing you need to worry about. Robert let out a sarcastic laugh. Oh, of course. But he seems like a good excuse for you to distance yourself even more. Remember, we're still sorting out the custody issue. Robert's insinuation alarmed Alice. He had never cared much about spending time with the kids while they were together, but now he seemed willing to use them as bargaining chips. Robert finally left the apartment, slamming the door harder than necessary. Alice sat on the couch, feeling the weight of the confrontation. She spent a few minutes staring into space, trying to catch her emotional breath, when her phone rang. It was Gabriel. His voice carried a tone that mixed concern and hesitation. He was also facing his own challenges. After years of building a career he believed defined his identity, he still hadn't found a new job. Although he tried to mask his insecurity, he knew it was affecting how he saw himself. In a moment of confession, he decided to share his feelings with Alice. Alice, can I be honest with you? I've been feeling lost. It's like I have nothing to offer right now. Nothing concrete. Alice smiled on the other end of the line, her voice soft. Gabriel, you've already offered so much. Your presence has been a relief amidst so much confusion. We all go through moments like this, but you're not alone. The conversation between them brought mutual comfort, but the tensions continued to grow. Alice realized that external challenges were increasingly weighing on her attempt to move forward. Robert's veiled threats and the weight of Gabriel's insecurities made her question whether it was possible to move on without the past continuing to interfere. Shaken, she asked Gabriel to come over and talk. When he arrived at her apartment, he immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? You seem so distant, Gabriel asked, sitting beside her. Alice held up her phone and showed him a message from Robert about the custody of the children. He's trying to use the boys to control me. Gabriel, I don't know if I can handle this. Maybe you should step away. I don't want you to get hurt because of my past. Gabriel took her hands, his gaze steady. Alice, it doesn't matter what's happening. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We'll face this together. Despite his supportive words, Alice knew the future would be full of uncertainties. But at that moment, Gabriel's gesture was enough to remind her that she wasn't alone in this fight. After her conversation with Gabriel, Alice felt a mix of relief and determination. Although the challenges were still many, she knew she needed to take control of her life. The next morning, while making coffee, Alice opened her notebook, where she used to organize ideas and plans. She decided it was time to set new priorities and take the initiative to resolve the conflicts overshadowing her life. The first step was seeking legal support to deal with Robert's threats. Alice contacted her lawyer, explaining in detail the messages he had been sending. The lawyer reassured her, explaining that Robert's attempts at control could be legally challenged. It was a small but significant step in regaining her confidence. Meanwhile, Gabriel also started taking action. He dedicated his mornings to updating his resume and reaching out to former colleagues. It had been a long time since he had felt so motivated, but Alice's support had reignited a sense of hope within him. One afternoon, after leaving a meeting with a professional contact, he stopped at a park to reflect. He realized his life didn't have to follow the same script as before. Perhaps it was time to explore new possibilities. A crucial moment came when Alice decided to confront Robert in person. Not to argue, but to set clear boundaries. They met at a cafe near Robert's office. Alice arrived a few minutes early, mentally rehearsing what she would say. When he arrived, wearing his usual air of superiority, she remained calm. "Robert, we need to talk," Alice began, looking him directly in the eyes. He raised his eyebrows. "About what, exactly? Your new dates?" Alice took a deep breath. "About our children. I want you to know that your threats won't intimidate me. I have my rights, and I will do whatever is necessary to ensure our relationship with them remains healthy." Robert seemed surprised by her firm tone. He tried to argue, but Alice didn't back down. This time, she felt she was in control. Meanwhile, Gabriel received positive feedback from one of the companies he had contacted. It was a temporary position, but he saw it as an opportunity to rebuild his career. That evening, he went to Alice's apartment to share the good news. "I got it. It's a temporary job, but it's a start," Gabriel said, with a smile that revealed both relief and hope. Alice hugged him, genuinely happy for him. "I knew you could do it. Sometimes, all we need is to take the first step." Later, during a simple dinner together, Alice and Gabriel reflected on how their lives were changing. Alice realized that, for the first time in a long while, she wasn't just reacting to circumstances, but taking the initiative to shape her future. Gabriel, in turn, felt that he was finally rebuilding the foundation of his life. "I never thought we'd get here, not like this," Alice commented, looking at Gabriel. "Maybe all of this had to happen for us to see what really matters," he replied, holding her hand across the table. The love interrupted in the past was beginning to resurface. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and challenges. Alice and Gabriel, despite the progress in their lives, felt the pressure of circumstances that continued to test them. Robert remained a constant source of conflict, and Gabriel's temporary job brought both hope and uncertainty. One day, while Alice was taking the kids to school, she received an unexpected call from her lawyer. "Alice, we need to discuss Robert's recent petition. He's requested a full review of the custody agreement." Alice's heart raced. She knew Robert was willing to complicate things for her, but she hadn't imagined he would take such a drastic step. After dropping off the kids, she called Gabriel. "Gabriel, I need you right now. Robert is contesting custody, and I don't know what to do." Gabriel listened attentively and replied calmly, "I'll be at your place in 10 minutes. We'll figure this out together." When he arrived, Alice looked distraught. Gabriel brought coffee and a notebook. "Let's treat this like a problem we need to solve. First, what did your lawyer say?" The mental organization Gabriel suggested helped Alice regain some of her confidence. They discussed strategies and analyzed the impact the legal battle could have on the kids. Gabriel also suggested seeking emotional support to cope with the stress, something Alice had never considered before. Meanwhile, Gabriel was also at a crossroads. The company where he had secured a temporary job offered to extend his contract, but with one condition: he would need to move to another city. Gabriel spent days reflecting on what this meant for him and his relationship with Alice. During a dinner at his house, he finally brought up the subject. "Alice, I need to talk to you about something important. The company wants me to relocate to continue the job." Alice put her fork down, trying to process what he had just said. "When would you need to leave?" "In 2 months, if I accept. But I don't want to make any decisions without talking to you first. You're a very important part of my life now." Gabriel's honesty touched Alice, but it also left her in a dilemma. She didn't want to stop him from seizing an opportunity, but she couldn't ignore how his absence might affect her own situation. That night, they decided they needed to be completely honest with each other. Alice opened up about her fears of facing Robert alone. With a trembling voice, she confessed, "Gabriel, I don't know how to handle all this without you. You're my safe harbor, and the thought of you leaving makes me feel lost." Gabriel took her hands, trying to convey reassurance. "I understand. But this job is my chance to rebuild my life, to ensure a stable future. It's not just for me, it's for us too. I don't want you to feel like you're alone. We'll find a way to make this work." They discussed solutions from regular visits to the possibility of Alice moving in the future. Each idea was carefully considered, but none seemed to fully resolve the challenges. By the end of the conversation, they agreed not to make any immediate decisions. They decided to cherish the time they had together while exploring solutions that could benefit them both. Embraced tightly, they stayed silent for a few minutes, drawing strength from the love they shared and the hope that, together, they could overcome any obstacle. Alice and Gabriel had long conversations about their future. He decided to accept the job in another city, trusting the promise of a future transfer that would bring him closer to her. In the days leading up to his departure, they made an effort to savor every moment together, exchanging vows of love and hope for what lay ahead. On the morning of his trip, Alice accompanied Gabriel to the airport. The bustling environment contrasted with the bubble of emotions that surrounded them. As they reached the boarding gate, Gabriel held Alice's hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Alice, this goodbye is temporary. I promise I will find a way for us to be together again as soon as possible." She tried to smile, but the sadness was evident. "I believe in you, Gabriel, and I will be here, waiting for that moment. Our love is stronger than the distance." They embraced intensely, ignoring the people around them. The final boarding call echoed over the loudspeakers, and Gabriel finally stepped away. Before passing through security, he turned back one last time and waved, with a smile mixed with melancholy. Alice stood still, watching until he disappeared from view. To process her emotions, Alice decided to drive aimlessly around the city. Every street seemed to bring back memories of happy moments with Gabriel. The soft music on the radio and the late afternoon lights created an almost cinematic scene. After some time, she felt it was time to return home. As she parked in front of her apartment, Alice noticed something unexpected. Gabriel was standing at the door, with a backpack slung over his shoulder and an unmistakable smile. She stepped out of the car, unable to believe what she was seeing. "Gabriel, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice laden with surprise and emotion. He walked up to her, holding her hands firmly. "I couldn't get on that plane. I realized I couldn't repeat the mistakes of the past and spend another minute away from you."
"I love you, Alice."
"Our love is here. It's now, and I won't wait any longer to live it." The tears Alice had been holding back finally fell. She hugged him with all the strength she had, feeling all her fears dissipate in that instant. "I love you too, Gabriel. More than anything." As they crossed the threshold of the apartment, Gabriel took Alice's hand and gently pulled her close. "Every step I've taken up to this point has been thinking about what it would be like to be by your side. Now, no matter what happens, I know my place is with you." Alice smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. Gabriel, you have always been my choice, even when fate seemed to push us apart. Now, together, we can create something that no obstacle can destroy. They embraced again, and the sound of their laughter filled the room, transforming the apartment into a true home. The love that had overcome so many challenges was now the foundation for a future full of shared dreams and a happiness they were finally ready to fully embrace. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.